Welcome back, everyone. We've had a little break and we're ready to get into the nitty gritty about bone health and overall health. We've really been enjoying our conversation so far with Dr. Brown, and we're going to continue.
Yeah, so Dr. Brown, one of the things that, Megan and I are on a mission to do is to really change the narrative and the conversation around bone health and musculoskeletal health because, to date, certainly I can speak to you talked about us being your Canadian neighbors, but in Canada, people don't qualify for the DEXA, which is a bone mineral density test for those at home that don't know what a DEXA is, until you're 65 unless you're considered high risk. But here's the problem, as you would probably agree, people don't often know they're high risk until they actually fracture. The problem with this conversation is that what's happening to investing in prevention and recognizing that our peak bone mass happens at around the age of 30 and starts to decline after. So, why are we waiting to have a conversation or testing when we're 65? We want to really change the narrative and conversation around prevention and around looking at what we can be doing with our lifestyle, which is a lot of your work, which we're excited to talk about now, in preventing things like osteoporosis and fractures. So, what is your take on that in terms of bone health and prevention, and it not just being an old person's disease?
Yes, exactly. It's really, it's, it would be great if we could all begin thinking about bone health as really a part of building total body strength. If we could think about strength, if we say, I'd like to, if we could start thinking about how do I want to look in 50, 60, 70, look at an 80-year-old. How do I want to look? How do I want to act? How do I want to be? We kind of have to plan ahead because our bones really are very forgiving. They can compensate for lots of shortcomings we give them, and they'll last fine until maybe 50, 60, 70. And so you, it's really very important to see the bones as the foundation for the total body health. And so to try to encourage us all to incorporate 5 or 6 different segments of behavior that actually strengthen the entire body. I don't know if I had to do a public campaign, whether I would think about staying stronger longer, that to get as strong as you can and stay as strong as you can for the longest period of time. And one simple way, a young person might say, well, how do I know? First, there's a direct relationship between bone density and weight. So underweight people are going to have less bone density, and very often underweight people fracture hips twice as much as other people when they get older. So this eating problem, we say, well, I really don't eat enough, whether it's because I'm trying to be stylish or whether I have a disorder or whatever. If you're underweight, that means that you're not building the tissue, the bone and the muscle tissue and all the tissue that you need. Or if you find that you're getting ill a lot, you say I'm get colds or this or that, then you know that your body is not have all the energy, like you said, all the fuel it needs to really maintain an optimum level of health. When you think about it, your body every day produces its own weight in ATP. ATP is the energy currency that your own weight. I mean, how can you do it? You produce this much weight in these little molecules that make a little compound that creates energy. And you need lots of substrate. You need, for example, a molecule of magnesium for every molecule of ATP. So you need tons of magnesium in the body. You need tons of zinc, copper, you need many, many nutrients to keep this machine going. So if we could have people think of the wonder of the body and the fact that it does a lot, but we need to support it. We need to support it with nutrients. And so if you say, one easy thing is to look at the signs of symptoms of nutrient weakness. Like at betterbones.com is my website. We have a little, and also on Alkaline for Life, we have a little simple nutrition detective questionnaire. Like if your gums bleed, if you black and blue, if you find that you get nocturnal leg cramps at night, these are all signs, if you don't heal quickly, if you have white spots on your nails, all signs of likely nutrient deficiencies. So we start paying attention. We start saying, is it signs that much less if you say I'm quite fatigued and I always get these cramps when I wake up in the morning and all of these signs and symptoms. So the nutrition stuff is really important. And the body is very forgiving. Youth is very forgiving. So you can compensate for a lot of things in youth. And it's a sometimes I see these little skinny girls, or just 10 and 12 already putting on their nail polish, getting dressed up, trying to stay thin. It's a shame because you really need to build a strong muscular structure. In fact, they found out with young people, if you have kids in the gyms, just still having gym classes, which is really important, jumping off little boxes, like maybe 10-inch boxes onto the floor, running around doing that, taking a little vitamin D, that these people will build stronger bones and that bones will last them enough to build enough bone density, like maybe just 10% more, that would allow, if through their life they would have enough peak bone mass to reduce the total fracture incident when we get to be 80 and 90, because the average age of fracture now is about 80, hip fracture, which is the most serious fracture. And the average person dies about 81. So I mean, you want to, if you want to live a long time, you pay attention to bone health, because that is the most limiting thing. And so how do you convince a young person if they want to live a long time? Well, that's like, so what you were talking about. Look, what do you want? You want to be beautiful. You want to be active. You want to be fun. You want to have fun. I particularly see it a problem for girls because they don't empower girls just to be strong. Even my son was growing up. Just boys will be playing basketball, little girls will be watching them. I mean, what is this? When we were little girls, we were doing of course, you can imagine I was a tomboy group, but it's a very striking thing. Physical activity, the bones, the body was meant to move and be very physically active, and there's a big cost to bone. And we sit all the times in the computer and playing video games and in our heads instead of out there in the world. So
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yes, and as with a kinesiology background, human movement is my thing, and you're absolutely right. And we're going to start a hashtag, Megan. Hashtag stronger, longer. I loved that, Doc.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
And Megan, you were thinking, I mean, we're both sitting here as mothers
Yes.
of daughters,
It's
Right?
They're running. Yes, they're running through my mind.
right? And it's so important that we talk about strength instead of skinny. I mean, strong is the new skinny.
That is
right?
was because at the beginning of this segment we talked about, how do we want to look when we're, 70, 80, but I would argue it's more, how do we want to feel? And so much with social media, we are definitely, everything is around a filter, or how pretty is it? Or it's not about physical strength. It's about how you look.
Yes.
And, you can look at somebody from the outside and think that they're healthy.
Yep.
What's your vision of health? But we should all really be focused on building ourselves up so that we're healthy inside, not just how we look on the outside.
And that is our motto, is stronger, longer. And you because you're such activists, you could also, in that healthcare month of yours, you could focus on children and giving them the self, how do you say, the self-empowerment to
Yes.
see
Yes.
Yes.
beyond just, oh, this is nice to have these these shiny nails with something painted on them, but that strong is. And what's really fun with that is this new this new awareness of, I'm very fascinated with Ayurvedic. I'm fascinated with the ancient systems of knowledge, like the
I
Ayurveda from
love that.
India. And
Yes.
there's an amazing teacher now, Acharya Sunya, who writes these books about the goddess, and she knows all the ancient texts. So she knows that the goddesses all are mythological figures that represent they all have all aspects to them. There can be strong and wicked, they can be kind and lovely and sexy. It's all that together. That's what we want to have the young people see, that there's all these qualities, and don't neglect any of them. And you may want to emphasize one more than the other, but staying strong of mind, body, and spirit is really
Absolutely.
the.
Well, and we've been referring to this empowerment conversation with helping to improve people's health esteem, their confidence, to understand that they can play a role. And I think these conversations are so important, aren't they, Meg?
Yeah.
With, we're talking to a medical anthropologist and a nutritionist who's been in the trenches doing this work. And we're getting down to the real basics of really empowering people to listen to their bodies, to get curious, and to put them into action. So I think it'd be really good now to talk a little bit about the action part to this conversation, because we're here to stock people's toolboxes. We want to actually, whether you're 20 years of age, you're 50, you're 80, we want to help stock your toolbox with some of the things in particular with bone and musculoskeletal health that's important to think about? I know you talk about your alkaline diet. Can we speak to that briefly? Because I know
Sure,
you've
sure,
written
sure.
a
Let me
book.
tell you that I spent a long time dealing with this and trying to think of how can we put it in a program that's really reasonable and workable and it is effective. And so there's like a 6-step program, and one of these steps is the alkaline diet. When you're working with an individual case, the first step is really to assess what's going on, but then the second step is the alkaline diet. And this is something we can do for everyone, for children, for adults, for men, for women, for everyone, because pH balance is the most highly controlled variable in the human body, and it affects everything, whether you're talking about kidney function, lung function, heart function, much less the bone structure, because immediately that you get a little acid, you'll start breaking down bone because you die very quickly if you get acid. So the body is always buffering those acids through many mechanisms, and the biggest reserve of alkaline mineral is the bone. So yeah, let's talk about the alkaline diet. And it's like our ancestral diet. It's a diet high in vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, spices. It does, I mean, we never ate sugar. You might have some honey, you might have some natural things like that. It has adequate protein. Some people get confused and think that it has to be low protein. You don't want low protein. You want adequate protein. Very important for bone health, important for muscle. But what we do is set aside this high use of refined foods, this high use of processed foods, this high use of flours and and processed grains. It's fine. Some, like some of the nuts and seeds, like quinoa, millet, all those things are great. So the average diet, I mean, it's so easy to go out and I have a little hamburger for lunch, and then I'll have for dinner maybe a cheese sandwich. 1/3 of the population in this country does not even have one fruit or one vegetable a day. I don't know how similar it is in Canada, but probably very similar.
I would say
Yeah,
very
I
similar.
would
Yeah.
bet you it's similar.
Yep.
Yep.
Everyone's diet is very acid because we don't have foods that are high in minerals. The high mineral foods are the vegetables that grow in the ground, getting the minerals from the ground, the fruits, the nuts and seeds, certainly herbs and spices. But we have many acid forming foods like this processed foods that's low in mineral. And now there's a great soil depletion. When you process wheat, for example, you lose a lot of the minerals and all of these other flours. And if you just look at, yeah, so we have to just get back to reading real whole foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, spices. We have a whole book on the acid alkaline food guide, which really tells you each food. Some foods just add a little acid, some foods add a lot of acid, some foods add a lot of buffer, a lot of alkaline. And the high alkaline things are, like I say, the fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, spices.
Well, and certainly I know as a therapist, when you have high
Mm-hmm.
acidity, I mean, that's the state in the body that disease can happen. That's when inflammatory markers go up in, right? And inflammation is the root of so much, the basis of most disease, including osteoporosis and cancer
Mm-hmm.
and cardiovascular disease and all the things. But we really do take it for granted, don't we, Megan? And we're in a fast-paced world. We're a drive through this and a drive through that, and it's so critically important to just get back, I think, to the basics and talk about the important things, the simple things like
Yeah.
Dr. Brown's
And
talking
it's a
about.
challenge, and it's
Absolutely.
a challenge, but
Mm-hmm.
you say, like, so we start out saying, well, see if you can get maybe even 6 or 7 cups of vegetables a day. Really you need about 12 half cup servings in order to buffer acid. So you say, how can I incorporate? In my case, I have to start out with breakfast. And the trick is, well, young people, they can eat a lot more. And then when people get older, they kind of lose their appetite. So you really have to be, and it's so easy to have a piece of toast and forget it, but you really have to think, how can I get vegetables for breakfast, vegetables for lunch, vegetables for dinners, make my snacks, vegetables and maybe hummus, vegetables and avocado instead of, some chips. And it is a challenge because of our modern lifestyle. And that's where you actually find many people getting into repair deficit. Now, you mentioned that inflammation is associated with all disorders, and inflammation is really a sign that the body's trying to repair itself. It's repair gone wrong. It's trying to repair itself, but it doesn't have the wherewithal or the chemical environment to repair. And so inflammation as repair deficit really you need to have abundant resources so you can repair the body, so you can reduce inflammation, and particularly high antioxidants, we live in such a toxic environment. The average infant is born, I think it's with 150 at least toxic chemicals in the umbilical cord. So you already come into this world loaded with toxins. And so we really have to, it's difficult to do it without supplements. And this is why I began the company Alkaline for Life, because I happen to work with some really genius physicians who develop supplements for people with autoimmune disease, extremely pure products. And I found that this is what we need to recover health, and it served to recover my own health. So I'm happy to make these professional grade products available. And we have to teach, we're going to eat the best we can, but many times we end up using supplements to help too.
Well, and I love this. I know Megan and I have had a conversation during Preventative Health Awareness Month with somebody who we'll have to introduce you to. His name's Dr. Jeffrey Alfonsi here in Canada, and he's in lifestyle medicine, obesity medicine, and really food as medicine. And so you'll love him, Dr. Brown. You will love him. And one of the things we talked about was that, and we love to cook. I love to cook from scratch, but as you mentioned, our soils are deplete, and we can't possibly, with our lifestyles, with the soils the way they are, we have to supplement now. And that doesn't mean that we should just be popping supplements and not eating good whole foods, but it's critically important to be supplementing. And that, I think, has even changed, and I'm sure you'll agree, over the last 40 years. Would you agree with that? I shouldn't assume, but would you agree with that statement, that it's different than it was even 40 years ago? This new pill for an ill society is requiring us to really look at things differently, even when it comes to nutrition.
For sure, for sure. And now there's many sophisticated tests, but you kind of also go by how you feel. You use your common sense. Am I giving my body a fighting chance? Am I getting the fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds? Our little nutrition detective questionnaire on Alkaline for Life or betterbones.com is good, because you can see, wow, I have you have a lot of different symptoms, and you say, I really probably should pay better attention. So you need nutrients for the basis, and you can measure, and you need to have minerals. Now, the whole thing about pH balance is it detects mineral adequacy, because the minerals that we consume in the fruits and vegetables are minerals generally in citrate form, and the body converts that to bicarbonate. And the whole thing of acid base is bicarbonate versus free hydrogen. And so you want to be able to have enough minerals to buffer the acid. So we developed this little pH test kit, a real simple little pH test kit. And what it goes with the book, and what it does is it tells you, you could take a pH paper and measure your first morning urine, and that's going to tell you if you are acid or not. And
That's wonderful.
You measure the first morning urine. I'm going to send you some of these kits. I was going to do it.
We're
We didn't do it
excited.
yet, but we will.
Yeah.
And if you say I'm below 6.5 in my first morning urine, then you say you don't have enough minerals, and that's a great way to start.
I think this is a great segue, because, Megan, when we
Right.
come back, we're going to talk about something that we're really passionate about, and that's a new cutting-edge Health Canada approved diagnostic tool for bone health analysis. But having that little test to take a look, sometimes we need to have things right in our face in order to create behavioral change. Because when things are silent, we don't know that we're acidic. We don't know that we have poor bone health until we fracture, or until there is a disease or a diagnosis. And so sometimes these small little ways, like,
I feel like it's just a start. If you're
Right.
going to do anything, just pick one thing, start with it, see what happens, and then, the side effect after that.
Yeah, because it will force you to change your diet, and force you to look at the requirement for potassium. You have to eat 13 servings of fruits and vegetables. Well, no one does it. And so we have to, and we can see, oh, I'm getting a little better. It's one of the most powerful tools we have.
yeah, it's a visual, which is great. So we're going to take a break here in a second. And when we come back, Dr. Brown, we're going to dive in a little bit more. We're going to talk about something near and dear to our hearts, the REMS.
Echolyte bone
Echolyte
scan.
REMS bone scan.
Yep.
And we'll have more with Dr. Brown. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.